staff and street committee, and out evaluating the streets and putting together a program for you guys to kind of evaluate where you are on the streets, prioritize them, and figure out what projects you need to do coming up in the future. A little bit about us, Veenstra and Kim, been in business since 1961. Primarily we do city engineering services. We have offices, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois. Headquarters is Des Moines, and I'm out of our Coralville office. We also have Mason City, Sergeant Bluff, and Moline. We've done a number of projects for Independence here recently. Utility mapping, we've put together new sanitary sewer maps, storm sewer maps. We're working on the water maps as they're still going out getting more information, so we'll keep updating those as we get the information. We're also working on the high school evaluation, and then the pavement management program. A pavement management program has a number of steps to it. You need to go around, obviously look at the pavement, figure out your limits. Are you doing the whole town, limited areas? Give them a rating, is it great, is it terrible? Weight it, which streets are more important than others, because not everyone is equally used. Then there's an input process where you talk to the users involved, and then the different paving technologies, whether it's concrete, asphalt, overlays, mill overlays, crack and seat, things of that nature. And of course, funding is always an issue. Initially, John, was it 2 years ago that C-Tree came through and did the
late summer of 11.
Summer of 11. And they've got a fancy vehicle where they go around and they drive all the streets, and it looks kind of like that. And interestingly enough, so I was building my PowerPoint presentation on Friday, pulled this off the C-Tree website. Saturday, I was at Walmart in Iowa City, and that vehicle was there. So I parked right next to it, and my girlfriend ended up chatting with the people that drive it, and so now she knows all about radar and lasers, and it's pretty high tech. So what this does, it drives down the road. It's got sensors that measure the bumps. It's got cameras that look at potholes, cracks, and it gives you a rating per mile. This is a great tool for definitely DOTs, counties where you have long runs. Within cities, they work, they give you a good general idea. They do get a little confused at times, but it's a good tool. And what they produced, they gave you two maps. One gives you a pavement condition index, which looks at cracks, potholes, things of that nature. The other one's a roughness, where basically it's just looking bumps per mile. So you can see the red, and what this was a handy tool to have as we were going out and evaluating the streets, because we can see kind of where we wanted to start, where to focus our time. And but there are a few things in here that because it gets confused at times, the machine, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a good start. So if you care to know anything about pavement condition index, you have different ratings, 0 to 100. It's not very exciting. There's the roughness, so you can see. Let's see. I think I've got a nice little laser pointer. Hey, so down in this area, you see you've got red in all these directions, but in reality, you don't. What happens is, as they drove through the intersection and they drove off of one pavement onto another, it produced a big bump. So actually, things are in pretty good shape east-west, but then north-south is where there's some issues. And surprisingly, all the seal coat roads turned out to be pretty nice and smooth. So gives you bumps per miles. Again, kind of move on. So then when we were hired, we needed to evaluate every street. So I came up, made sure it was on rainy days, drove every street, and went block by block and identified on big maps, intakes that were needed, water ponding, cracked roads, manholes that had heaved, joints that were open, talked with city staff about known issues. They didn't really identify any like known sewer issues. Like sometimes you have a sewer which is collapsing and the street will go in. Or water main issues where if you had a water main break, and I think you had quite a few this winter, like everybody else, you'll see a lot of holes in the street. Next, we developed a project map. So here's some pictures, give you kind of an example of what was encountered. So, and somehow I managed to pick out the first street. The former city manager lived on that street, and it's one of the worst. This picture I did take before the elections, but
Thank you.
this area down here, 2nd and Allerton 17th, they didn't put in any storm sewers. It's a pond. And here's, you can see close up, there's water ponding, streets cracking, the manhole here, the subgrade is wet, it freezes in the winter, it's heaving, busting up the pavement. So you should have good pavement, but the water has nowhere to go because it just runs to the end of the street and then stops at the field. So that's a priority area as far as condition.
And who lives there?
I think maybe right there. Am I right?
No, actually, that's my driveway at the end of that street. I back into that puddle on a daily basis.
Yeah. Here's the street. This is the 5th and 3rd. If you remember, we had a lot of red there as far as smoothness. And this is kind of an odd area. There aren't enough storm sewers, not enough intakes. And some of the streets have the storm sewer in place, but no intakes. Other streets have no storm sewer at all, and then the water just sits there. And water is a pavement killer because it gets under the subgrade. Winter hits and it's bad news. This picture is to show you kind of how the C-Tree smart machine gets confused. Street's in good shape, street's in good shape. It hits this bump right here where the materials change, and it's enough of a bump to skew the data. So that's why you need to have a human go out and really look at each one. The types of projects, we kind of divide up into asphalt overlay, cone overlay, just doing some patching, or whether it needs a full reconstruction. Also looking at the water ponding, we were able to come up with storm sewer projects, and it worked out great that we were also doing the mapping, so we had all the data for what we needed for both projects. This map here shows you the individual projects, and then the color behind it, it got a little weird when I printed it. That is your TIF map, which we also managed to create electronically and put together. So we've got blue, we've got overlay, we've got some dash lines here, mill and overlay, full concrete reconstruction areas. If you zoom in, there's some areas, you can kind of see a little bit of blue right there. Intakes, like for example, let's see, I believe this street has storm sewer, but they, for whatever reason, skip intersections, like every other intersection is intakes. So water sits in those other intakes. Then I've also had some sidewalk identified. If you're gonna go in and do a full concrete reconstruction of a street, it's a good opportunity to finish off your sidewalk and connect that network. You're actually in pretty good shape as far as sidewalk goes. You've got, most of them have good ramps, ADA ramps, and you've got a fairly well connected. I know John has mentioned a few areas that may need some sidewalk in the future, which can be incorporated with some of these projects. Criteria, rating criteria, or criteria weighting, we look at a number of factors. Traffic volume, one of the big ones. Of course, the main route, you got 150 coming through, and then first. Route classification. This is something that the DOT has. You assign functional classifications, and this allows the colored roads here to be eligible for federal funding. Recently, well, I guess I'll get to that in a little bit, but these are the routes that you can apply federal funds to. If we go back one, here we go, 150, that's a state route, so there's some state funding opportunities for that one. And then, of course, your TIF districts. And I know Steve had some ideas before he left. I think John's familiar with what all is in place for your TIF districts. So then we kind of group the projects. This is just a sample. I've got all my overlays, mill and overlay, and then full depth patching. And this is just a list, street by street. And then I've got some notes over here. What if it's a seal coat street? One of the things I was told was the city wants to try to get rid of seal coat streets, just because it's a regular maintenance headache that it would be nice to not have to deal with. TIF district, which one it's in, they're color coded to match the map. The functional classification going back to the federal map. So if it's a major arterial or a lot of local streets here. And then condition and priority. Now these are the two where it's a bit subjective. When I looked at them, and just to simplify things, I made them, ranked them poor, fair, or is it very poor? And then priority, just kind of looking at, is it near a school? Is it near a business district? Is it one of the arterials? Ranking them as far as priority. Say a dead-end residential street with just a few houses on it is not going to be the same priority as one of your main arterials. So then we sorted by condition and priority. And so things started to pop up as to what we wanted to look at. And then the next step was developing the plan. We met with the streets committee, we meet 3 or 4 times. Met with street superintendent, and as we were putting together the plan, one thing that came out was timing. Going through these and seeing what we could still do this summer to get some streets repaired. John looked at what funding was available, and I believe there's funding for these projects for this year. And then we're working on short-term goals and long-term goals. And this is where council involvement, staff involvement, this is putting together your CIP, your capital improvements program, putting together your 5-year plan, 10-year plan. So here's the current list of the recommended phase 1. And then, so the next step, so we're looking at what we can do this summer, which primarily we're looking at mill and overlay, asphalt, quick to design, quick to construct. Looking at a project for next year that we can design this winter, but then putting together the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan. And again, that's where talk to the people in the community, your staff, and start kind of ranking how those will lay out. Also looking at funding. You've got your TIF districts, GEO bonds, USTEP on Highway 50, the STP funds, which is your federal aid route. Your most recent STP project was the 20th Avenue widening. Currently, and the city gets allocated money every year for this fund, and it just builds. And right now, there's nothing identified on the InterCogs transportation plan through 2017. So if you want to look at a federal route, federal funding, 2018 would be about the soonest that you could get that one done. The project has to be on the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, and then it goes to the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program, and then they allocate the funding. Questions?
Turn the lights on, you're done with it.
I'm done with this. Lights.
So what part did you think we could get done this summer?
I'll back up here.